reports, which includes the safeguard requirements to ensure that it aligns to the donor, and also these reports are submitted to the donor for review and approval. Then we provide guidance and support in terms of generation of knowledge management product for the project, and also at the end of this project we will be recruiting the independent terminal evaluator who will come in to undertake the evaluation, or to evaluate the progress, the project, how was it implemented, the efficiency, the impact, and the successes of the project. Then at a certain point we undertake technical and financial supervision visit. So this is informed based on the review of the documents that have been submitted to us, and also the discussions that we have with project management unit. And once we ascertain we need to undertake a supervision visit, we inform the project team and we plan accordingly. So that is just some of the ways that as CI we support the Cbit Uganda portfolio. So just a snapshot, this just gives a summary of what I've been talking about on how we are able to track and monitor the project implementation and come in when we are needed and provide oversight frequently when need be. So this is just a snapshot. I'll not go through it because I've already mentioned. So that is it from our end. Just to, as we continue with the training, you can be able to see how CI comes in, then how the functions of CI, the functions of Ministry of Water and Environment, and the function of Africa Innovation Institute in this project. So it helps in terms of as activities go on, you know where to go to. So that is it from our end, and I would like to return the meeting back to the MC.
Thank you very much, Miv. Can we have a round of applause to Miv for the presentation? Yes, Miv, thank you so much, and appreciation to CI and Jeff for the technical and financial support that you provide to the government of Uganda as we try to enhance capacities of our stakeholders in the enhanced transparency framework. Next, you'll allow me to invite Ms. Irene Chekwoti, who's then going to take us through what this transition into the enhanced transparency framework means for us as a country. Ms. Irene Chekwoti is the Principal Climate Change Officer in the Ministry of Water and Environment. Ms. Irene. For some reason, we are a bit with our hands. Please give her a round of applause as she comes.
Don't worry, I'm not the PS. I was saying, don't worry. You can clap after if I make sense. For now, we can only clap for the PS when it comes later on. Good morning once more, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Irene Chekwoti, and I work with the Ministry of Water and Environment, the Climate Change Department, as a Principal Climate Change Officer. My presentation, it's not yet there, but my presentation today will be a little bit brief. stakeholders in the room. That's why I just wanted to give some bit of history to tell us where we are coming from so we can pick up. So briefly, between 1980 and 1990, the World Meteorological Organization acknowledged that global warming was happening, but it was linked to human activities that was inducing that global warming. And so there was need for action. And so in 1992, the very first climate agreement, which we now call the United Nations Framework Convention Agreement, UNFCCC in short, was established in 1992, and with the objective of ensuring that there is stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would be safe for biodiversity, but also for humanity. So that agreement did not commit any country to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so the convention, the countries that were party to the convention, negotiated a binding agreement, which is called the Kyoto Protocol. So the Kyoto Protocol, which was adopted in 1997, committed industrialized countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions below the 1990 levels by a specific percentage. So it did not commit developing countries like Uganda, but the developed countries, where the industrialized countries, which are supposed to reduce their emissions based on the historical background that the developed countries have industrialized for quite a while, and they could be the major cause to the global warming that is happening, or that has been happening. And that's why they had a commitment to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And so at the heart of the UNFCCC is a principle which is called the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and capabilities. That whereas we have a common problem, which is global warming, but we have different responsibilities to address that common concern. And so the developed countries were supposed to cut their emissions, but also to provide support, financial, what is called the means of implementation, that is financial, technological capacity building to developing countries like Uganda, to do something that will also contribute to reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, which is the main cause of global warming. So, that said, they were supposed to report every 2 years through what is called biannual reporting, or biannual report every 2 years. Update the parties or the countries on what you're doing to cut your emissions. What are the mitigation measures in place? And at the same time, the developing countries are also supposed to come up with what is called, or develop what is called biannual update report, also every 2 years. And in that biannual update report, developing countries were supposed to highlight their trajectories on greenhouse gas emissions, but also at the same time, the mitigation measures which they're putting in place, what kind of support they require the developed countries to provide for them to be able to implement their mitigation measures that they have put on the table. So, based on that long story, so you realize that the UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement, the UNFCCC and the Kyoto Protocol was a bit lenient on developing countries, was focusing more on developed countries. But here comes the Paris Agreement of 2015. The Paris Agreement tries to bring everybody on board. All countries come together on the same table, and everyone is supposed to commit or make a commitment on how much or what they can do to combat climate change. How much greenhouse gas emissions are you supposed to reduce? And this is through what is called the Nationally Determined Contributions, the NDC. And that's why you see that in our NDC of 2022, Uganda committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 24.7% below business as usual scenario. And so Uganda, just like other countries, we have commitments already. Unlike the Kyoto Protocol, where only developed countries had commitments. Now we all have commitments. And if we all have commitments, what do we then do to track these commitments? And how do we do it? This is how the enhanced transparency framework of the Paris Agreement came into play, making it enhanced so that everyone is able to report on what they're doing, what is the progress in terms of implementation of your NDC. And then that is where we come up with what is called global stocktake. Now, the global stocktake comes into play to assess all countries' NDCs implementation or progress. And that is how we're able to tell that we're either on track towards reducing global warming or we are not. So that is the story. Let me stop it there. And let me go to the other agenda items. I hope that you're able to pick where we are coming from. Like Professor said, it's important to know where we're coming from. At least we may not know where we are going, but where we're coming from is important. So, we go to the next slide. Okay. Okay, so in the next slide, we will see that we have what really forms the enhanced transparency framework. We have only two arms. The first one is transparency for action, and the other one is transparency for support. Now, in terms of transparency for action, this is where we look at the NDC implementation and reporting. Okay? Make commitments, implement it, and track and report progress. And then the other arm, we have the support. Now, the support is two-way. The support is it's in terms of support provided. Now, that is the support provided by industrialized countries or the developed countries. Remember the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and capabilities still applies under the Paris Agreement. And so the developed countries still have the responsibility to provide some support to enable developing countries like Uganda to implement their commitments. And we have also support received. Now, this applies to developing countries like Uganda and others, where we have received support, being it financial, technological, capacity building. That kind of support that we receive, we're supposed to report, acknowledge that we have received the support from, this country and that country, and you're expected to report it in a more transparent manner. Next slide. So, coming from the biennial update report to the BTR, go to the next one. To the BTR, we would like to see what really has changed. Is there any significant change, or it's still the same arrangement? So, in terms of the fundamentals of the enhanced transparency framework. Now, when it comes to, it's a bit difficult to look there. When it comes to the fundamentals of enhanced transparency framework, we see that we have some changes that have taken place. We will see that initially, we had the reporting, which was called the biennial update report. You see the blue one? I don't know, they say men are colorblind, but maybe also some of us are colorblind. Is that blue, deep blue or something? The first one, here. This very one. Okay. Okay, so you will see that we had the biennial update report. And then that was for developing countries. And for developed countries, we had the biennial report. And this was every 2 years. And then when you look at the other side, you will see that now we are into what is called biennial transparency report. whether you are developed, industrialized, or developing country, we are all into what is called biannual transparency report. So we see a lot of commonalities when it comes to the Paris Agreement. So now, developing are supposed to do what is called biannual transparency report. And secondly, so under the technical analysis, because those biannual reports are supposed to undergo what is called technical analysis by the technical expert review teams that have been trained already by the UNFCCC. We see that we had review of biannual report and the national communications as well. But now also, we now have also what is called technical expert review that reviews the biannual transparency report. And then we had, during the previous arrangement, we had what is called facilitative sharing of views, but now we have what is called facilitative multilateral consideration of progress. This is very important for all of us to know, because as a country, we are moving into enhanced biannual transparency reporting. So these are the processes that we will be undergoing as a country. So we will be at some point undergoing facilitative multilateral consideration of progress. Okay, so we can go to the next slide just to reduce on the time. In terms of the next slide, we see that there are 3 reports that I have highlighted coming from biannual update report. And then we had also what is called national communications. But now we are having also biannual transparency report. Now what we are leaving behind is the biannual update report. What we're carrying forward are those 2, the next 2. The national communication, but also the biannual transparency reporting. Now, coming from the BUR, we see that there are certain additions of activities that need to be undertaken within the biannual transparency report, but also the national communication. We see, when you look at, we have item national greenhouse gas inventory that is still consistent up to today. It remains that when remember, Uganda has developed 3 national communications. And so we will be moving towards developing the 4th national communication that we will do together with the first biannual transparency report. And so you see that the national greenhouse gas inventory, line 1, column 1, and then also 2 and 3, they are the same. So they remain. We will still have that component, which is very critical when it comes to climate change mitigation or combating climate change. That is very important to know what your greenhouse gases are, the status and progress. So that remains. In terms of still on the BUR, just to give you highlights of what we used to report and what needs to be reported. Still on the BUR, we had mitigation actions and their effect, but now we will be having programs containing measures to mitigation climate change, which is still the same thing. But what is different is when it comes to BTR, we will have progress made in implementing and achieving NDCs. When you look at BTR, it's more of GHG and NDC progress. So that has changed. And then when you look at finance, technology, capacity building, you will see that under the national communications, that also remains, except there is a change on we need to include what is called research, systematic observation, education, training, and public awareness. Those are 2 new items that we need to report under the national communication. When it comes to the BTR, could you make it a little clearer? When it comes to the BTR, we see that those items also remain, the financial, technology transfer, capacity building, support needed and received, they remain the same. But what is interesting also is that when it comes to BTR, there is an aspect of what is called flexibility. And this is coming from the modalities, procedures, and guidelines that have been put in place to guide countries when they are developing their BTRs. So just to give you a highlight of what really are the items or components under those communications. So we can go to the next slide. So those reports that we will, the BTR that we will put in place or we will develop will undergo, will have the GAG inventory. Now, this is just what is coming from what is called the modalities, procedures, and guidelines for developing the BTR. The GAG inventory part is a must. And this time, it's more rigorous as opposed to the GAG reporting under the BUR. And so that means that countries really need to have enough data or sufficient data that is close to, some kind of robust data should be in place that really speaks to the national circumstance or speaks to the country. And then there is a progress in NDCs, that one you must report in the BTR. Also support provided, mobilized. This one applies to developed countries, but also support needed for developing countries. Adaptation is also an item that is, you can decide as a country whether you want to include adaptation as you report your BTR or not. It's a bit optional, but as a country, we know that we front adaptation because of the nature of our vulnerability. And so we will definitely include adaptation reporting in our BTR. So this report will undergo what is called review by the technical expert review. And eventually we will have what is called facilitative multilateral consideration of progress of our NDC. And if we go to the next slide, I want to speak briefly to, there are all these things that I've been speaking to. How do they even connect to CBIT? Is there any interlinkage? Does it make sense? Does this project really make sense to us as a country? So we see that when it comes, next slide, when it comes to CBIT 1 and CBIT 2, we see that we have a big interlinkage between the enhanced transparency reporting that we're talking about and also the work that is being done under CBIT. Why? Because in CBIT 1, but also CBIT 2, now let me speak to CBIT 2. CBIT 2 specifically, we will be coming up with what is called GAG data sharing protocol, or GAG data sharing protocols. And we will have these protocols between government and non-state actors. And this is very important because we know that data providers do not only fall within government institutions, but they also, actually majority of the data come from the non-state actors. And so it's important that we have this connection or some kind of understanding between the data providers who are non-state actors with the government institutions. So we see that when we do that, we will be able to have accurate data as a country that will enable us to make our BTR report speak to the country and not just trying to use some kind of data that speak to European countries or other countries. So it means that we'll have data that is specific and speaks to the country. And then we'll have the GAG data collection templates. We know that we did this under CBIT 1, and we're also doing this under CBIT 2. For the sectors that we did not cover under CBIT 1, we're now covering under CBIT 2. So we will have GAG data collection templates, because the main problem or challenge then was that whereas institutions are mandated to collect data, but they do not speak to the parameters or the requirements of the IPCC reporting. And so coming up with kind of smart data collection template would simplify the work and also collect the data that is relevant to the kind of requirements under the UNFCCC or IPCC. So you see that this makes a lot of sense, that CBIT is doing all this work to make the reporting of the country more accurate, but also in a more timely manner. And then we have the capacity building on GAG inventory, which was done also during COVID. They were beneficiaries of CBIT1 trainees. I think I see a number of them in the room, but no problem. We have CBIT2, and all the new participants will be able to participate under CBIT2 capacity building. This is very important, because why GHG inventory is very important is because this is like a cornerstone. It's like a pillar that will enable you or the country to identify the sources of greenhouse gas emissions, but also put in place the relevant mitigation measures. And at the same time, will inform policy, policy making and strategies as well. And so without the GHG inventory, you will not be in position as a country to know where you are. So this one helps you to know where you are and can open way for you to know where you're going. So all this supporting the country to bring everyone on board, as we see the private sector. It was very interesting to know that we have different participants from different institutions, even those we have never interacted before. I just thought we will ensure that we keep the list of today's participants with us, so that we'll be able to continue interacting more with you. And so it brings all of us on board and will enable us to collect our required data, but also be able to report now as a country in a more accurate manner